Let me know if you can see the screen here. Perfect. I'm seeing some thumbs up. Thanks, Ashley. And hold on, let me get this in a nice little focus mode. Hopefully this will work for everyone. But thank you so much for taking part in this session. We know we ran a little late on our opening session, but let's definitely get this one started. We're super thrilled to have you all join. For a little housekeeping, this webinar session is being recorded and will be available to registrants. So you're all muted right now to ensure sound quality, right? We want to limit the amount of crosstalk we get, but you can always feel free to share your thoughts and questions at any time. And if you experience any technical issues, like if you were part of the opening ceremony, we definitely experienced quite a few, but I think we're good to go. So for our workshop agenda, we're just going to spend a little time talking about volunteer recognition, retention, and recruitment. We have 3 great speakers lined up on each of these topics. We'll do a little Q&A and we'll have you chance to ask the presenter some questions, and then we'll do a breakout room. So we want to hear a little bit about what you guys have, and you guys can cross-share amongst yourselves, and we'll do a little share out at the end, and we'll go into wrap up and next steps. All right, for workshop speakers, I'm Justin with Prosperity Now, and you'll next be hearing from Magali Garcia from MFS Cache, Oregon, and then you'll be hearing from Geisha Graves from United Way of the Bay Area, and then you'll hear from Tamara Cree from United Way of Greater Nashville. All right, we'll kick it straight over to Geisha. Why don't you take it away?
Magali, actually.
Yeah, Magali.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. It's an honor, actually, for me to be here with you all. The subject of my discussion here will be volunteer recognition. And we all know how important that is for all humans, right? All humans need to be recognized in a meaningful way for their efforts. This helps to build self-esteem and confidence, to feel appreciated. When volunteers feel respected and valued, they are more likely to feel connected to the program and to continue their involvement. Therefore, recognition is an important component of volunteer retention. We're gonna hear more about that later with Tamara. But yeah, this last 2 years were of special significance for our volunteers. They never just prepared taxes. We know that. They did more than that. But during these last 2 years, they became essential workers. No, I'm not exaggerating. More than ever, our clients relied on those tax refunds. They faced the most excruciating circumstances. We all saw that. They needed that refund. They needed those tax credits.
My name is Jenny. How may I assist you?
They needed their that money from the earned income tax credit, those child tax credits. And to make tax preparation even more crucial, the economic impact payments only reached those who had filed their last year's taxes, right? Or they received Social Security benefits. Recent data shows that between 5 to 10 million people have yet received even one of those EIPs. So, and as important as their work was those 2 last years, due to the COVID pandemic, they had to overcome bigger challenges. Besides the tax software they were familiar with, many from using that tax software for 5 or more years, they had to learn, in our case, it was TaxSlayer. They had to learn different and new softwares. We implemented a drop-off model, so they had to learn Zendesk. That's a file management software. They also had to learn AirCall, and that's a type of a call center software. They also use DocuSign, and they were all new to them. So Never before I saw such a dedication and commitment from our volunteers. So how important it was for us to recognize that effort, that work, that commitment. So this last year, this tax year we called it a never-ending tax season. We finished our last tax return in late August. So we managed to gather our volunteers in a virtual celebration. And after recognizing all their efforts, we presented some awards for them. And Justin, if you want to pass to the next screen, please. So we selected from 1 to 5 people in 10 different categories. So those plaques, they were such a success. I want to share this with you because this might, you might want to think about this because like I said, it was a very successful for us. We selected one person to be the top recruiter of the year. We had 5 people that received the Rookie of the Year. We also had a Intech Extraordinary. We had Rockstar Tax Preparer. We had 5-star Quality Reviewer. And we had VITA Committee Wizards. And we had Reject Buster. And that was the person who actually was checking the reject. So, and that was what he received that award. We also had the Best in Town Help Desk support. And we also provided IT renewal service. So we had 5 people that actually received the IT Master Award. And it's really dry right now, but it was so much fun because we attached each category with some fun graphics. So like for the Rookie of the Year, we had a baseball player and so forth. So they had really a good time with that. That's, as you know, we wish to be able to do more, but we couldn't because of all the restrictions that we had. But not only that we got those plaques for our volunteers, every year, our organization hosts a fundraising event called the Gathering of Good. And every year, a person, a group of people, or an organization is selected from the board to receive an award. This year, they selected the MFS Cache Oregon volunteers as recipients of the Aileen Johnson Community Service Award. And I would like to have you please join me and watch this next video. And because this shows just how the hard work they put into this last season. And we just wanted to show them some appreciation, which for their commitment and dedication, and that we don't have words to describe. I never met a group of people that did so much for their community. So thank you. And after this video, my next co-panelist will join us. Thank you.
Okay. Can't see it. Give me a second. My apologies.
Justin, we can't hear you.
Sorry. It's been a long day. Anyway, Gisha, yeah, we'll share the link in the chat, but Please.
Okay, so you guys can watch that video sort of in your own free time, but I'll just continue on volunteer recognition. So for our San Francisco Bay Area Coalition of Tax Sites, we actually made pins as our volunteer thank you gift. And just so you know, locally, we have about within our coalition, about 120 tax sites, and that's over 2,000 volunteers. So we had a pin for our in-person volunteers, which looks like a person wearing a mask and a superhero cape. And we had a separate pin for being a remote volunteer, which looks like a person doing taxes in bunny slippers. And in the past, we had done t-shirts, mugs, notebooks, stickers, and sunglasses as the volunteer gift. But we really needed something that was low cost and was small enough to keep shipping costs low, as well as they were mailed out directly to our volunteers. And to a bigger pile was mailed out to our coalition's site coordinators, who may have been hosting end of season parties or potlucks. We used enamelpins.com, and these pins were so well loved that we're thinking about doing a pin series where you have to earn your pin potentially for different roles. Like maybe we'll do a brain pin for quality reviewers, where you'll have to earn your brain pin and ask your site coordinator how you can become a quality reviewer. Next slide, please, Justin. So volunteer recognition in general does have an effect on volunteer retention, and it really should be done throughout the volunteer experience. At our site, we had a site-specific Slack channel for all of our site volunteers. And Slack, for those that are not familiar with that, Slack is basically a workspace or a forum where volunteers can communicate or chat with one another. These are a couple of the thank you reminders or kudos that we shared with volunteers over the all volunteer chat channel during tax season. You can see here, one of them was shared in March. And at that point in March, you can feel that volunteers were getting a little bit frustrated because the government was changing tax law in the middle of tax season. So we sent out this reminder to all of our volunteers, which says, a quote from a volunteer, it says, "I had a family that has unemployment compensation that really needs their refund to make rent because they are unemployed. They are getting 2,000 more additional, more with the unemployment compensation adjustment." And so that was the quote from the volunteer. This is what we said to the volunteers in connection with that. We said, let these quotes be a reminder that the work you're doing is very much appreciated by our clients. We are here now in the middle of March, and we can't thank you enough for the work you're doing. We know that this season/year in particular has presented so many challenges for everyone, and that we would all like to get back to in-person. But again, let's be honest, you are doing something pretty hard. You are helping taxpayers navigate the complicated world of tax and doing it remotely to boot. So thank you for your work thus far. And don't forget that the work you are doing is really important. And that was just one example of something that we shared with volunteers in the middle of tax season. So again, volunteer recognition in general does have an effect on volunteer retention, and it really should be done throughout the volunteer experience. Next slide, please. So retention of your existing volunteer base is important to think about throughout tax season, not just at the end. If you lose a returning or experienced volunteer after 1 year, it just means we haven't maximized the coalition's and or the site's investment in terms of time, money, and energy it took to bring on that volunteer. It's like you're starting from scratch again, and that's okay. Sometimes you can avoid when volunteers just wanted to help for 1 year, they had a life event, they're moving, but if you can, do the best you can to keep your returners or experienced folks, because once you have a volunteer that is not only interested in the work that you're doing, but interested in coming back to help, they've already passed that initial hurdle that first volunteers have to pass. They passed that initial hurdle of like training, they certified, and they got over their fear of volunteering, and they're committed to the cause. It's less effort to bring that person back into the fold than it is to recruit someone completely new to the program overall. So once you have volunteers interested in your VITA program, what can you be doing to retain them? or keep volunteers engaged throughout their VITA volunteer experience? That's the question here. And what can you be doing to help make their volunteer experience a memorable or meaningful one? Next slide, please. So having started as a tax prep volunteer for VITA 12 years ago, before becoming a coalition leader, I will say that, yes, we talked about volunteer recognition. Yes, getting a volunteer shirt was great. And having an end of season party to meet other volunteers in the county and celebrate our accomplishments, also great. But that really was just icing on the cake to an already great tax volunteer experience. And what made me come back year after year were these things here on the screen. So I'll go through each point individually. Next slide, please. First off, I had a great VITA volunteer onboarding experience. And so this is what I tried to provide for our specific sites volunteers and encourage of our coalition's site coordinators. So my own site coordinator 12 years ago scheduled a 30-minute one-on-one with me so I could get logged into the software for the first time and get a tour of the facility so I would know where the bathroom or break room were, or where I could store my belongings securely during the volunteer shift. And so as a site coordinator, I also did one-on-one onboardings with each individual volunteer in the week before they started volunteering with me or on their first day. And additionally, sites in our area did group onboarding sessions or orientations as a way to introduce the whole group to the site and set expectations. But whatever way you do it, onboarding your volunteers to site expectations and going over site-specific processes is essential. As an example, our site onboarded 70 site-specific volunteers that would be using Get Your Refund, using this rough agenda here on screen. And for reference, 9 of our site volunteers were new, the rest were returning or had VITA experience. So we grabbed onto the volunteers' calendar for 45 minutes, and we tailored the content of their onboarding based on whether or not they were new, returning, a greeter, a preparer, a reviewer, basically so we're respecting their time. Next slide, please. Beyond providing volunteers with a great onboarding experience, regularly communicating with them throughout season is crucial. Some sites in our area send out an email every week detailing what happened in the previous week, how many people they helped, common rejects that they saw in the previous week that they want folks to avoid going forward. And they also share in this weekly email any important software or tax law updates that folks need to know about. Our site specifically had a shared Slack channel since our volunteers were operating remotely, and we wanted to create a space where folks could ask their technical or tax law questions and help others who have asked questions over this channel as well. I also did a mid-season check-in with each individual site volunteer where I asked them, hey, how are things going? And it gave many people the space to say, I love this, working remotely, or I miss in-person volunteering, or the training our state provided to us was insufficient, where in some cases we could take their feedback and make a screenshot guide for everyone to help folks through complicated state tax related issues. And you really want to help folks that are struggling, this last point here, because if they continue to have a poor experience, they're going to be unlikely to come back. And okay, maybe this volunteer opportunity isn't the right fit for them. Sure, that could be the case, but they may just be struggling because they're new to process. So you might continue to give them easy returns to work on, or let a new volunteer shadow one of your experienced mentor volunteers, but definitely help those that are struggling. Next slide, please. Aside from communicating with your volunteers, get to know your volunteers in general. People will want to come back if they like you. And many people like that feeling of connectedness. They want to be a part of a community, something bigger than themselves. Volunteers will come back if they feel connected to you, your site coordinator, or the team in some way. Next slide, please. And last but not least, give the opportunity for your volunteers to grow into new roles over the years. Some volunteers will want to stay in the same role year after year, and that's okay. But sometimes all it takes is a nudge from you to try a role you would like to see them in. And if you or your site coordinator have done the previous step of getting to know your volunteers, then you can create roles based on what the site needs and ask specific people to help out based on their interests and their strengths. So if you do these 4 things well, provide a great volunteer onboarding experience, regularly communicate with your volunteers, get to know your volunteers, and then tap on your volunteers to serve in specific roles based on their interests and strengths, 80% of the time your volunteers will come back. Like 70 to 80% of our volunteers in the Bay Area come back year after year. But growth in the program does not only come from recognizing volunteers and keeping volunteers engaged in these ways. It comes from recruitment and growing the volunteer base as a whole. My colleague Tamara from United Way of Greater Nashville will talk more about that. Tamara, over to you.
I want to say hello to everyone and just honored to be on this panel. I'm going to tell you what I know, but before I get to that, I'm going to tell you how I know what I know. So on the screen right here are some volunteer management resources that we use. And don't worry, you'll be able to get these slides, but these are all websites and organizations that exist to promote volunteering. I am a volunteer manager. That is my vocation. So when I started in this profession, I got a very important piece of advice that I'm going to share with you right now. And that is, if you're a volunteer manager, go out and find a volunteer gig. Volunteer for another organization. And it's not about self-care so much as just experiencing how another professional manages all the things we're talking about: volunteer retention, volunteer recruitment, volunteer recognition. And you can see how, not only how they do it, but also how it makes you feel as a volunteer. Then the other source of inspiration, information, and motivation for me is I attend monthly meetings of our local Volunteer Administrators Network. We call it VAN, and we have members from over 80 local not-for-profits. We meet monthly for, sometimes we have a speaker, sometimes we have panel discussion, we network and we share resources. Again, it's all about knowing what the competition is all about, what everybody else is doing in your area. Very, very inspirational just to know that if we're struggling with working with volunteers remotely and trying to set that up, that all the other organizations in town are struggling as well, and we can share resources. So if you don't have such a group in your area, start one. It's well worth it. Another way I learned all these things that I'm going to be sharing with you is surveys. We use JotForm to do these surveys, and our volunteer management software is Volgistics. And if you want to know more about those, we'll be happy to share with you. But we first surveyed our volunteers after that March 2020 shutdown. And then we surveyed them again when at the end of this, right after tax day of 2021. We used the Volgistics software because we used our tax year 2018 base. So it was a larger base. I know I'm hearing a lot of people are saying that they've lost volunteers due to COVID. We did not give our volunteers the option to quit. They're still in our database as far as I'm concerned until they tell me they have not quit. They are still part of our organization. So the 2 questions, and of course we worded it much more nicely, and there was a lot more than just 2 questions on these surveys, but the 2 pieces of information that we used the surveys to get from was to ask the volunteers, how do you want to serve? There was virtual, there's traditional, drop off, but we also gave them the option to sit out. Like I said, we did not give them the option to quit. We gave them the option to sit out. And the second question we wanted to know was, what can we do to make you feel safe to volunteer? So I want to make a note, and if you want to write something down, all the volunteers who sat out we consider them as first-year volunteers in terms of recruiting them, wooing them, training them. We're going to and as Geisha said, a returning volunteer, someone who has experience, is very, very valuable. And we don't want them to be lost. So we're going to just woo them back in. So this is all what I know from all these different sources. If you could go to the next slide, please, Justin. So this is what we're hearing about why people don't want to come back to volunteer. They don't want to commit, they're uncertain about the future. Either the volunteer or a family member is at risk, or they have pre-existing conditions. I've heard that they're working from home and it's too much computer time. Their responsibilities have changed. They've had a baby, got a puppy. 1 in 10 Americans moved during pandemic. Or they're reluctant to learn new technology. Nagali talked a lot about all the different technology and all the different new things that volunteers had to learn this year. Some people just are reluctant to learn. Too many new things. As Geisha said, there was a tax law change right in the middle of tax season. And now we have new words and new ways of doing things. Or they started volunteering for a different agency. If you can move to the next slide, please, Justin. But here's what we're hearing about people will want to volunteer for VITA. They want to help people. I was at Vanderbilt University, had a student service fair. And instead of putting on our flyers and talking to the students about preparing tax returns, we asked them to join our tax justice team. And we were telling them how we were spending the summer filing income tax returns for homeless people so they could get their stimulus check. That really got them excited, just that rewording. A lot of people are reevaluating their life and career goals. And I'm sure you've all heard about the Great Resignation. According to the Bureau of Labor, 3.6 million people quit their job this year, April through July. And the highest percentage was among 30 to 45-year-olds. A lot of people are recently retired. They took an early retirement. Some of it was COVID related. A lot of people are now, again, working from home. And so they just miss being around other people. They miss being part of that volunteer VITA family. People just move to the area and they don't know anyone. Some people want to pick up some new job skills using all this new technology, such as Slack and Zoom. More than 40% of Americans are actively seeking a new job, and that's according to the Society for Human Resources Management. 40% are looking for a new job. More choices for volunteers. We're adding in jobs that don't necessarily require the advanced certification level, something that's more appealing to episodic volunteers, navigators, assisters, greeters. The company that they worked to went to a 4-day work week, and now they have a little bit more time to volunteer. And generally, their responsibilities have changed and they have more free time. So our job as volunteer managers is to make a plan to overcome these negatives and to capitalize on the positives. So Justin, I think we're going to turn it over to you, and you're going to explain to everyone about our question and answer session. And then we'll be going into a small group rooms to discuss this further.
That is correct. Thank you so much, Tamara, Magali, and Geisha, for coming on and talking about this. We have a few questions here in the chat. This is from Suzanne, and so the question is, what is the van, and how do you start building one, Tamara? What did you go through?
Well, the van is just what we call it here in Nashville, and it was organized by the Hands-On Nashville. I know a lot of cities have a Hands-On organization. When I lived in Indiana, we had a similar group, and it was organized through RSVP. And how you start it is just reaching out to all your not-for-profits. If you're at a United Way or a service organization, you probably have connections with not-for-profits in the area. Most not-for-profits only afford one volunteer coordinator. So there's one person at the Red Cross, one person at the hospital, and we can just go on down the line, animals, food, all kinds of not-for-profits. I would just reach out to them and just start like you would start any other meeting. Hey, we're going to have a meeting. Let's get together and form it from there. Good question.
All right. Thanks for answering. I think we'll lobby this to all of you. I know you, Geisha, you talked about Slack and sort of volunteer communications, but I think the broader question is, how do we make sure that volunteers don't give any confidential information in discussions? Volunteers are always very excited and want to help, right? But how do we make sure they don't, sort of cross the line? And what sort of guidelines do you set when it comes to volunteer communications? And I'll give that to everybody.
Yeah, so when we had the onboarding session with each volunteer individually, we really took some time to talk about security and confidentiality, because it was going to be really important for folks to abide by that in this sort of remote, space. So we set guidelines forth, like you can't share personal information over the Slack channel about a taxpayer that's personally identifying information. That if you're referring about a specific case, you can refer to it to me in a direct message using the client ID, specifically, not a social security number, not a phone number, not a name, but the client ID that is in Get Your Refund. Or you can, if you're asking more about the tax law as it relates to perhaps a taxpayer, you can speak more generally and ask that over the all volunteer chat channel to just get information about, like, how do you generally handle a situation like this? If someone has X, what do you do? So you're really emphasizing to the volunteer right in the onboarding of that volunteer, that you have to be really careful when it comes to dealing with taxpayer data. And so that was outlined right in the onboarding. And I put in the Slack channel the links to our Slack guide for volunteers, as well as to the security checklist that Get Your Refund put forth in the use of their product. So we really went over that in their individual onboarding to ensure that each volunteer understood what to do. Magali, Tamara, anything else to say?
Yeah, I would like to share that by using Zendesk file management, Zendesk provides like an incident number, like a ticket number. So in our emails, or even talking over the phone, or in our virtual meetings, we would make reference to those incident numbers. So our volunteers will go to Zendesk and open that, and they will get all that information. And and Zendesk also gives a chance to write notes for each incident. So you can keep a good history about that client's tax return without having to share anything more than just that incident number.
We kind of wimped out. Can everyone hear me? Yes, we kind of wimped out in that for tax year 2020, we did not actively recruit first year volunteers because we knew that we would be working remotely. But we are looking at, we're reinventing VITA. Everything is on the table. We've been in strategy meetings for the last month. And so we're looking at setting up intake or tax prep only sites or volunteer hubs where first year volunteers can come in and work through the Get Your Refund, but in a group setting so that we can have not only experienced volunteers in that group, but a site coordinator to help monitor and mentor them along.
Right. I think we have few more questions, but I want to spend a little more time on our breakout rooms because I think that we have a lot of great discussion questions. I think what we can offer actually when we transition to our breakout rooms is we have some discussion questions for you. These are just very rough guidelines on what you may want to talk about. What kind of factors for or against have you heard at your site for volunteers, as well as what kind of ways we found to overcome any negative reactions to volunteering. But I think there was actually really great question posed here in the chat, and maybe this might be one that you want to use in your own breakout room, which is from Sophia, talking about how to make your site a site for everyone, right? You have a lot of volunteers from different age groups, lifestyles. How do you blend that, right? You have students and professionals and retirees. How do you make that site a site for everyone? So if you want to use that as your discussion question, please do. But when you come back from your discussion question around 1:40, I would love to hear in your chat, just drop it in the chat. What's one word or phrase that you heard the most during that breakout room? And you can just put that in the chat, and we can do a quick just sort of look over and see what the most common phrases were. So what I'm going to do right now is push us all into breakout rooms. There are about 200 of us here on the call, so I'll make about 20 breakout rooms and you should be assigned automatically. Great. I'm going to open all these rooms and you should be invited to join. So please do hop into those rooms as you get a chance. Thank you. And yeah, looks like we're good. So some of the words I got were community, fun, new, safety, self-care, hybrid model. Yeah, returning volunteers, communication, longer breakout sessions. Yes, Debbie, we will. We have varying degree of breakout session. We have a really tight agenda. We always seem to do this to ourselves, but in the meantime, while we finish wrapping up this section, I really want to talk a bit more about what we have done here at Prosperity Now, and then a little bit more about what to expect going forward. So first, we have the VITATrain. If you're unfamiliar, VITATrain is Prosperity Now's sort of training to help volunteers get through. It's totally online. It's really just more on that tax law side. So it really helps tax volunteers deal with basic and advanced queries that they might have just to get them through. Here's the link in the chat. So I encourage you to check that out. We will be trying to renew it this year. Given all the changes, it may take a little longer than one would anticipate. In addition, we talked a lot about volunteer management and Prosperity Now. What we did back in 2018 is we had a Lunch and Learn series focused on volunteer management software. So we had a bunch of volunteer management software come in and talk about their products in sort of like a cold call business kind of way. So highly recommend you check out those. And I think with all that settled, we'll do a little bit more about bingo. So right now I'm going to put in the chat. You have the bingo card from Bingo Baker. So the instructions are put in your first and last name, and we'll be doing calls, like sort of like bingo calls now. At the end of every session, we'll do 3 words. So pull up your bingo card if you don't have one already. And the 3 words we're doing right now, the first one is quality site requirements. Yes, we get a new card every day. So there'll be 5 winners per day. And at the end of every day, we'll just flush all the results and then re-scramble you so you get a new card. Thank you, Ashley, for that great question. The first word is quality site requirements, so QSR. And then, put that in the chat. The next word is COVID-19. Wow, real happy words here. And then the third word is our favorite, which is the Form 13614-C. And that's it. So feel free to mark up your bingo cards. Again, the words are quality site requirements, COVID-19 and form 13614-C. So if you have those on your bingo cards, feel free to mark them up and we'll check them here on the back end.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so when we're trying to do this bingo card, I cannot get this little yellow thing to go away, this yellow box so that I can click on the words.
Hold on, let me try tinkering. I apologize, Stacy, for that. Let me just make sure. Sorry, got a bunch of windows open. Yeah, is it not? For me, it's doing it. It says what does the yellow box say for you?
This is your own unique bingo card. Click a box to mark it, click a box again to unmark it. And if you're playing this game over multiple days, bookmark it. And it says, okay.
Okay.
And I click okay and it doesn't go away.
Maybe it's, can you click the words or no?
No.
Okay.
Like I have the little hand gesture thing, but it won't let me click the word.
Stacy, I'll work with you on the back end. Maybe you need a refresh, but I will check. Just email me and we'll work offline during this little break.
Okay.
And if not, I have the back end, so I can mark it for you. It's not as fun. Okay. I apologize, but we'll make it work. Thank you for your patience. Yeah. If everyone, you click only the 3 words mentioned, Catherine. Yeah, that is, we want to make sure that the word, because bingo would go by really quickly. So thanks for your question. And with that, we'll close the session. Thank you so much for taking part of that. And our next session is through Brookings. So feel free to attend that. And we'll talk a little bit more at 3:05. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.